I suppose it's the best thing I have done.
Oh my
Is that
God.
a corpse? Of all the undressed women at the salon this year, the most interesting is Madame Gautreau because of the indecency of her dress that looks like it's about to fall off. Wait a minute. The indecency of her dress that looks like it is about to fall off? Am I missing something? Oh, right. Give me a second. Okay, that's more like it. This piece is titled MadameX by JohnSingerSargent. This painting was a little controversial, but why? Let's go back to the beginning. So who is the woman in the painting? Her name is Virginie Amélie Avegno. She was born on January 29, 1859 to father Anatole Placide Avegno and mother Marie Virginie de Tourneau in New Orleans, Louisiana. After her father died during the American Civil War in 1862, Virginie and her widowed mother moved to France. Virginie grew up in Paris and when she was a teenager was introduced into high French society. She eventually married the wealthy French businessman Pierre Gautreau, who was twice her age. Virginie Amélie Gautreau was very popular in Parisian society for her unique beauty, and she was often referred to as La Belle Madame Gautreau in the press. This beauty would also attract the attention of artists living and working in Paris. In fact, Gautreau received numerous requests from artists asking to paint her portrait. But in the end, there was one artist in particular who Gautreau would accept, and his name was JohnSingerSargent. JohnSingerSargent was born in Florence, Italy to American parents Dr. Fitzwilliam Sargent and Mary Newbold Singer. From an early age, Sargent was interested in art and his passion was encouraged by his parents who would give him sketchbooks and take him on drawing excursions. And so by the time Sargent turned 18, he was ready to enroll at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France. And after completing this education, Sargent exhibited a selection of his portrait paintings at the Paris Salon in 1881. At just 23 years of age, 2 of his pieces earned distinction. The first was an honorable mention for this portrait of his teacher Carolus Duran, and the second was a second-class medal for this portrait of Madame Ramon Subercaseaux. Earning a second-class medal meant that Sargent could exhibit at future salons without ever needing to submit to the jury. Okay, remember when I said that Virginie Amélie Gautreau agreed to Sargent's portrait request? Yeah, well, persuading Gautreau wasn't that easy. In fact, Sargent needed to tap into his network to close the deal. He wrote a letter to a friend saying, "I have a great desire to paint her portrait and have reason to think she would allow it and is waiting for someone to propose this homage to her beauty. If you are beyond avec elle and will see her in Paris, you might tell her that I am a man of prodigious talent." It's also important to remember that both of them shared a similar expatriate background and a desire to move up in French society. With all this in mind, it's not that surprising that in 1883, Gautreau accepted Sargent's offer. But wait, why would someone as successful as Sargent need to seek out a model to paint rather than paint those already willing to commission him? Well, the short answer is attention. The long answer is that Sargent probably realized that a portrait of a renowned beauty such as Gautreau would create a buzz and attract a lot of attention. In turn, this would increase his popularity and cement his position as a society painter in Paris. Though, unfortunately, this wouldn't end in the way that Sargent had planned. MadameX features Virginie Amélie Gautreau wearing a form-fitted dress with a heart-shaped plunging neckline and embellished dress straps. She leans on the table to her right, steadying herself as she pushes her body toward the audience while looking to the side so that her face is in profile. This pose conveys a striking duality. She is both assertive and withdrawn. Throughout the painting, Sargent repeatedly explores these contrasts and opposites. Beyond her pose, another example of this is Gautreau's pale lavender toned skin against the deep black of her dress and the dark brown background. And if we look even further, amidst the paleness of her skin, there are subtle hints of bright pink visible on her ear and lips that make them feel alive. These details give the impression that Gautreau is not just passively posing for us, but actively engaging and listening, as though aware of our gaze and acknowledging it in her own quiet way. Her hair is styled into a neat updo, and on top of her head sits a small crescent-shaped tiara symbolizing Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt. This tiara was not contrived by Sargent, but was an accessory that Gautreau had been known to wear on multiple occasions. And as we look at the lower half of the painting, it's notable that Gautreau is painted with minimal jewelry and no gloves, which was uncommon for the time period and would have been seen as improper or even scandalous. And speaking of no gloves, if we look at her left hand, she holds a black fan that almost completely blends into her dress, and with one speck of white paint, Sargent depicts Gautreau's wedding ring. Okay. So this painting caused quite a scandal, but why? Well, Sargent originally painted MadameX like this. You'll notice that while her left dress strap is securely sitting on her shoulder, her right strap has fallen down. This fallen dress strap, combined with her wedding ring and her pose, was provocative and created a daring and sensual impression that openly defied 19th century decorum. While most women were covering up, MadameX seemed to be undressing. So how did Parisian society react to this piece? Well, in 1884, MadameX debuted at the Paris Salon, and back then, it was salon tradition to protect the identity of the sitter. So MadameX actually debuted under the title Madame ... However, this didn't stop Parisians from immediately recognizing Gautreau, and so the painting was instantly condemned and mocked, with some critics even drawing exaggerated caricatures of Gautreau. While many viewed MadameX's revealing attire and seductive pose as a shameless bid for attention, others found Sargent's portrayal of Gautreau as unflattering. And historians have even discovered a quote from one critic whose disapproval ran much deeper. Just 3 years earlier, one critic wrote that Americans like Gautreau and Sargent were not just taking attention away from French people, but that they were infiltrating Parisian society. The writer noted, "They have painters who take away our medals, like Mr. Sargent, and pretty women who eclipse ours, like Madame Gautreau." With this context, it's no surprise that Parisian society reacted with such fury. To them, it was a prime example of American ambition. But in defense of Gautreau, I think it's worth questioning how much control she had over what she wore or how she posed. After all, she didn't commission this piece, and so she most likely didn't have much creative control over the way she was depicted. After MadameX went on display, Gautreau was devastated and humiliated by the response. Her mother even demanded that Sargent remove the portrait from the salon. However, Sargent insisted that he had painted her just as she was dressed. But eventually, Sargent would repaint the strap and in 1916 sell the painting to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where it continues to hang today. Sargent would go on to relocate to London, have an illustrious career in England and America, and become the leading portrait painter of his generation. Gautreau, on the other hand, would go on to have her portrait painted again, but this time, she would commission it herself. And one portrait would even share a suspicious resemblance to MadameX. Hey, thanks for watching. If you're interested in learning more about what happens next, check out this video I made about Sargent's next piece, Carnation Lily Lily Rose.